They thought it was just another artillery barrage at first, just more American shells whistling overhead, detonating on impact or seconds after hitting the frozen soil, scattering snow, churning craters, and disrupting formations as they always had. But then something changed. Something subtle but deadly. Something the German infantry advancing through the Ardennes during their last major offensive in the winter of 1944–45 could not immediately explain. Because now the shells weren't just hitting the ground, they were exploding in midair, at the exact altitude where death was most effective, shredding entire platoons in seconds, raining steel from above with terrifying precision. And what confused them even more was the way these explosions seemed almost intelligent, as though the American artillery gunners had suddenly become omniscient, able to sense where German columns were hiding, even in the fog, even beneath the cover of trees. And it was only later, after thousands of men were killed in open fields and woods without warning or chance of cover, that the word began to circulate among the German ranks. Something about a magic fuse, something so advanced it bordered on science fiction, something that had turned Allied artillery into a godlike force that no foxhole, tree line, or winter storm could hide from. And what they were witnessing was the devastating arrival of the proximity fuse, one of the most secret and game-changing technologies of the Second World War. A marvel of American and British engineering that used miniature radar systems inside artillery shells to detect when they were near their target, allowing them to detonate in the air at the optimal height to inflict maximum casualties on exposed troops, vehicles, or even low-flying aircraft, and, for the Germans, especially those fighting during the Battle of the Bulge, this development was nothing short of catastrophic, because it meant the old rules of engagement: scatter under tree cover, wait out the barrage, move once the shelling stops, were now obsolete, as clusters of infantry that would have survived traditional shelling were now being cut down en masse by airbursts timed with eerie precision. And the first time German artillery officers realized what they were up against was when they observed entire units vanish beneath a sky filled with fire. When even their most well-trained soldiers broke and ran from shelling they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't escape. And panic began to spread as commanders tried to reposition units, only to find that the new fuses were equally deadly against moving targets, that cover no longer guaranteed safety, that even retreat became a slaughter under the invisible eye of these airborne assassins. And back at Allied command posts, where General Patton's forces pushed back against the surprise German offensive, the mood shifted from cautious urgency to confident aggression. Because with the proximity fuse, the battlefield had been rewritten, and American gunners could now fire fewer rounds and cause greater destruction, decimating enemy morale with a level of accuracy previously unimaginable. And it wasn't just about killing more troops, it was psychological warfare too. For German soldiers began reporting that the very sound of incoming artillery had changed, that they could hear the detonation above them and feel the sky rain metal before they could even drop to the ground. And worse still, the proximity fuses weren't limited to field artillery. They were soon used in anti-aircraft shells as well, turning flak bursts into precision detonations that tore through Luftwaffe bomber formations with horrific ease. And even V-1 flying bombs began to fall more quickly, unable to dodge the shrapnel-filled skies. And in the frozen forests of Belgium, where the Ardennes campaign ground on through snow and blood, the Americans began to press harder, knowing that their artillery now had the advantage not just of range and firepower, but of timing. Split-second, calculated, and utterly unforgiving. And the Germans, already short on supplies, already struggling with fuel shortages and thinning lines, found themselves unable to respond. For no amount of bravery or discipline could stop what they could not see. And no countermeasure they tried, from spreading out formations to altering movement times, seemed to work against this new storm of steel. And at Allied intelligence briefings, officers listened to intercepted German transmissions filled with fear and confusion. with reports of entire battalions vaporized, with whispers that the Americans had developed some kind of remote control artillery, a ghost weapon that hunted men by sensing their breath. And while the science behind the proximity fuse was complex, radio waves, vacuum tubes, microtransmitters built into spinning shells, its impact was brutally simple. More dead enemies, fewer wasted rounds, and a battlefield that tilted violently in favor of the Allies. And by the time German high command fully grasped what they were facing, it was too late. For the proximity fuse had already broken their momentum in the Ardennes, and as Patton's counterattack began to collapse the German spearhead, as Allied divisions retook lost ground with renewed speed, the snow-covered battlefields bore silent testimony to the technology that changed the war. Not a tank, not a plane, not a new kind of bomb, but a fist-sized component tucked inside a shell casing, born from science, guarded with secrecy, and unleashed with vengeance. And in the aftermath, as German prisoners were marched past craters filled with mangled helmets, shattered trees, and silence, many asked what had happened, how so many had died so quickly. And the answer came not from a weapon they could see, but from one they never saw coming, from a fuse that knew where to explode, from a sky that no longer needed to miss, and from an enemy who had turned mathematics and machinery into a new language of death.